So I'm delighted to be joined by Tim Holt, International Area Director for Barbadillo, and he's going to do a little bit of sampling of Solear here for us, and he's also going to wield a magnificent cane here. Well, welcome back to part 2 of our visit with Barbadillo here in Sanlucar De Barrameda. In the last episode, we talked very much about the winemaking processes, maturation, and the use of the remarkable cathedral bodega spaces that they have at their disposal up here on the Barrio Alto. In this episode, we're going to get a little bit more into some of the products that are produced, the interrelationship between those products, where they're marketed, and most importantly of all, we're going to actually get to do some tasting. So let's continue. These are wines that once dominated the world and made Jerez and the surrounding towns of the Sherry Triangle some of the richest places on earth. One of the things that's perhaps most fascinating about the Marco de Jerez in general is that the whole Manzanilla sherry distinction, because there are two parallel universes that look very similar, but actually there are quite a lot of subtle differences between them. Yes. And we have seen on previous episodes various people manipulating the Venencia, which is a metal device that looks a bit like that. But here in Manzanilla, it's called a cane.
This is the caña, so that's cane in Spanish, and it's very simple. You can just go out into the countryside with a penknife and make it yourself. It's that easy. And the Venencia is something that came along afterwards, where in Jerez, where the big bodegas made a lot of money, they could afford something smarter, so the actual traditional Venencia has got a silver cup and a silver handle. And then the middle bit, the stem, is actually made of baleen from the whale. Of course, that's not done these days. It wouldn't be politically correct. So, so it's actually a sort of plastic with a stainless steel at either end. But in Sanlucar, we still use the caña by and large, and I prefer using this. So that's why I have it in my hand.
Right. Well, we will see your skills now demonstrated.
Right. So what I'm going to show you here is the Solear Manzanilla, and this is actually the penultimate stage in the Solera system for Solear. So it's pretty much 6 years old, or almost 6 years old at this stage, and just one more cast to go through. And there you have it. When you get it straight from the cast like this, it's very pungent. You've got the yeast still very much alive in the wine, and they've got a very fresh, sort of briny feel to it on the nose, reminding you of where we are, which is quite close to the sea. And then people talk about saltiness when it comes to Manzanilla, but it's a slightly odd description because there's no salt in it as such. The influence of the sea here is not literal. It's not the salt coming in on these casks and making a Manzanilla literally salty. It's all about the influence of the sea, and the yeast, the flora that's growing on the surfaces of wine, grows more abundantly here, and that abundance of flora creates the that apparently salty flavour. I would say sort of briny aromas. It reminds you of the sea, but there's no literal salt there.
So Tim, the sample you've just tasted there, that's pretty much ready for bottling, isn't it?
It's pretty much ready for bottling. This is in the penultimate stage, or what we call class, or clase in Spanish. It's another minor difference between Sanlucar and Jerez, where we talk about classes, whereas in Jerez generally they talk about criaderas. But we're talking about the same thing. These are stages in the Solear system, and this is a number 2 stage, and the final stage is number 1, so number 1 class. So yes, it's pretty much ready for drinking, and indeed in most worlds this would be perfectly good for bottling right now, but we like to age it a little bit more, over 6 years altogether. This is nearly 6 years old, so it's got almost all the character you might expect from the Solear Manzanilla. So that's this almost ready. The other thing of interest here is the fact that this line of casks we have here, that's where we get our Manzanillas Levante and Poniente. We extract from certain casks of the Poniente from somewhere over there at the far end, near towards where the windows are facing the sea. And then this, the Levante Manzanilla, we bottle from over there, from casks which are 6 or 7 casks which you select from over there, do exactly the same thing. So we're talking about exactly the same stage in the aging process, exactly the same wine, but because they're in different parts of the bodega, they come out differently. It's, the whole thing about this is just to show how incredibly sensitive the floor is, the yeast is, and how just the tiniest change can completely change the way the wine comes out.
And the last time I was here, we did have a chance actually to sample both ends of that, and it is astonishing just how different they are.
Yes.
At the same age, with what, 50 feet maybe between them in terms of...
Yeah, well, I think, yes, maybe possibly a wee bit more, but 50 metres rather than 50 feet.
Right, okay,
because we're at far end, and because this is actually a very big bodega. It's over 100 metres long. Right. It's actually the largest cathedral bodega that's in use these days. But you do get these differences within the same building.
And how many bottles of those are released each year?
300 bottles or something like that.
Okay, so
it's very minor.
Yeah.
It's for a very niche market for those who really want to discover all these idiosyncrasies that we have in these buildings.
And if you had to choose one of the two, which would you go with yourself?
Well, I guess it depends on the mood I'm in, but I think generally speaking, I go for the Poniente, which has got the sort of fresher, more Manzanilla feel.
Right.
But there again, this has got the character, the Levante has got the character there, the bit of body, which actually in the cooler months sort of seems to make more sense. So it entirely depends on one's mood. So.
Okay. And what else do you have on the table in terms of the
Right, well I've got, as well as the Solear and its components, so to speak, we have the Manzanilla Pasada. This is the Pastora label, and the Manzanilla Pasada is an aged version of the Solear. So any Manzanilla, the word Pasada on it means it's an aged Manzanilla. It's over 8 years of age. And it's got a slightly different look to it. It's slightly more golden in colour and so forth. And this is a continuation of the Solear system in another bodega now, but we go through 2 more stages to get to this final stage.
Okay.
And then, as well as this, we have the Principe Amontillado, which again is a continuation of these 2. So this is an older version of this. So this is actually 12 years old, over 12 years old, aging of the wine in the Solear system. And so it's a fully blown Amontillado by this time.
Right.
So these are the 3 I've got on display here.
So now we've come to my favourite part of any of these episodes, the actual tasting, and my thirst is certainly building as we've been building up through the winemaking process, through the sampling. Tim, I think you're going to take us through broadly the progression that you just showed us.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through the Manzanilla, through to the Manzanilla Pasada, and then to the Amontillado.
Right.
So starting off with the Manzanilla, as I mentioned, this is a 6-year-old Manzanilla, which is actually beyond the average age of most Manzanillas. Most are between 3 and 4 years of age. But this one has a lot more Solera aging, as we say, so a lot more time under the floor, under yeast, and the result is immediately apparent on the aroma.
Yeah.
You've got a pungency there, a minerality on the nose,
Yeah.
and that sort of brininess that reminds you of the sea, so to speak. And then on the palate, it really shows through. Because here we got, for a bone dry wine, it's incredibly smooth, and showing a lot of finesse.
Yeah.
So that's what you get with extra aging underfloor, also on floor, on dead floor as well, because the living floor sinks to the bottom.
Yeah.
And it's almost like aging on the leaves at the same time as having this active living floor on the top, protecting it and keeping it young. You never get normally see wines of this sort of age with this youthful aspect.
Yeah, no oxidation at all.
So this is what the yeast does. It maintains its youth in one sense, keeps it crisp and light, but at the same time has the advantage of the aging, getting that smoothness and subtlety and finesse coming through.
Yeah, incredibly refreshing.
That too, yeah. And goes well with the local king prawns we have here too.
I intend to sample those later. The other great thing about Solear is that it has tremendous distribution worldwide. So this is not something people are going to struggle to find at home.
No, that's right. So this is really quite easily available, whether you're in the UK or in the United States or as far away as Australia or Japan.
Right.
It's there. It's available.
All your own work, of course. In getting that
Some of it,
distribution there.
but not all. Yes.
Terrific. People will notice during this program that when I sample, I tend to drink the entire glass, but I won't today.
Right. Well, we'll just irrigate the floor with that one and go to the next one, which is the Manzanilla Pasada.
Okay.
Now, immediately on pouring, you can see the difference.
Yep.
The colour, it's got this golden
It's almost a
hue.
golden colour, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. And this is a sign of a properly aged Manzanilla Pasada. So Pasada literally means pass through more stages in the Solera system. Pasada, past, if you will.
Yep.
So that's a way of sort of remembering where the name comes from. It's unique to Manzanilla. No other sherry is called this way or classified this way, but it is an official classification of a Manzanilla. It's a type of Manzanilla.
Yeah, and in fact, the sherry and the Fino club, I guess, are struggling in a way to find the right nomenclature for an older Fino.
Yes, I mean, they maybe they should be saying Fino Pasada, but of course they don't. Although back in the day, if you look at the historical records of 100 years ago, the older Finos were called Primera Palma, first Palma,
Right.
and second Palma,
Right.
and third Palma was basically already in Amontillado.
Yeah,
So the word
yeah.
Palma was coming through, but that was the hieroglyphics he saw on the, or we still see in some bodegas,
Yeah.
of what looks like a bit of a palm leaf coming out of the chalk palm leaf. That's the way they do it in Jerez, but here it's always been about using the word pasada to indicate age, and when it
Right.
gets beyond a pasada, we've also had this descriptor of Manzanilla Amontillado, so it's sort of almost an Amontillado but not
Yeah,
quite,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
of
yeah.
course you get the fully blown Amontillado.
Mm.
But anyway, back to this one, the colours there, but also on the nose, you're getting much more aromas there, and you've got a hint of what might be an Amontillado. There's just a subtle nuttiness coming through, along with the briny, yeasty,
Still there, isn't
bready
it? Still there. Yeah.
aromas of the Manzanilla, because the yeast is still very much alive on the surface of the wine when it's in the cask, but it's much thinner, and so the darkness actually is coming from oxidation. As the yeast thins out, the
Right,
protection
yes.
is less.
Yep.
So you're getting this combination of oxidation and what we call biological aging happening at the same time. Then on the palate, the thing that always surprised me when I drink this is how remarkably smooth it still is. Because all that extra aging, you expect slightly more intensity in terms of acidity, and slightly more robustness, if you will. But this has got all the smoothness of a proper Manzanilla.
It's very rounded, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's key for a good Manzanilla, is always look for that smoothness on the palate. And so despite its dryness, you've still got that smoothness happening. And then you get this fuller flavour, the hints of nuttiness, as I say before, coming through. Even chamomile, which is interesting because the word Manzanilla actually means chamomile in Spanish, and maybe one of the theories why it's called Manzanilla in the first place comes from the fact that it has these sort of chamomile overtones, if you will.
And certainly, if you go into a hotel or a bar sometimes and make a mistake and ask for a Manzanilla, you can be given a cup of tea, as I found to my own misfortune.
Yes.
Not what I wanted at all.
Yes, that especially happens in the north of Spain, rarely here.
Right, yes, yeah. I shouldn't think so.
It's more the other way around here.
Yeah. Very refined, very refined. Right.
Well, it's a well-recognised Manzanilla, this one. It's got prizes, medals, recognition of galore. Well, so is the Solear, to be honest.
Yeah.
But this more than any, it just recently got 94 points with Robert Parker, the wine advocate.
Yeah.
And that's an incredibly high rating for a Manzanilla, especially because it's not one that's usually getting into those levels of recognition. So we're very happy about the way it's been recognised.
What kind of impact do you see on sales when something like Wine Advocate or Gentis Robinson gives you high scores? Do you see an immediate uplift in sales?
Well, it's not quite the same as, say, you've got a vintage bottling of some sort, which is obviously of a limited availability. And so people will rush for that 1995 vintage of wherever, and it's all gone, in no time at all. This is slightly different because people know it's going to be the same next year and the year after, and it's not going to run out because it's a Solera system.
Which is the whole point of it, really, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, yes. So, yes, it does have an effect. It creates a reputation. People recognise it for what it is, and gradually you're increasing distribution and sales as a result.
Okay.
So there is effect, but it's not a massive effect as you might get with a specific vintage.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So onto the Amontillado. So this is really twice as old as, almost twice as old at least, as the Manzanilla Pasada. It's officially over 12 years old, but this is quite a bit older. And now you can see the full colour of a fully blown Amontillado, so much darker. So you've got this hazelnut colour.
Yeah.
And on the nose, it's changed now radically. You've really got that full sense of nuttiness and the caramel nose coming through as well, despite it being still a bone-dry sherry. There's no sugar in any of these, but you've got that caramel aroma, which tends to make people think it might be sweet, but it isn't. And beautiful on the palate, full nuttiness, a little bit more acidity there and concentration that you get in the Manzanillas. But it's a completely different wine in many ways. It's just the flavour's just something else.
Completely different.
But still showing an awful lot of finesse, and you can still see some of the original Manzanilla subtleties, the finesse that it has coming through all the way. And I think this is what makes a Manzanilla, shall we say, a Manzanilla-based Amontillado, in other words, an Amontillado made here in Sanlucar, slightly different from the rest. It's got that level of finesse that you don't usually expect to see in an Amontillado.
I think, and again, I'm something of a novice in this, but I think I could detect that this is a Manzanilla Amontillado. I think it is quite distinctive, having just spent this week tasting a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, you can sense the interrelationship between these, I think.
Yeah. No, it is there.
But incredibly smooth.
That too, we still got that smoothness. It's got a little bit of more acidity, a little bit more bite, a little bit more intensity, but it all adds to it.
Tim, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Cheers.
My pleasure. Cheers.
From a sherry aficionado perspective, Barbadillo really is a very important producer. not just in terms of its size, which is very significant in the Marco de Jerez in general, but also in terms of its sophistication and constant search for innovation. From the initial work on soil sampling through to the launch of Endrama. I don't think any winemaker in the region exhibits the same sophistication when it comes to different locations for maturation of wines across the massive footprint than Monse Molina here at Barbadillo. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode and our visit with Barbadillo. If you did, please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel and helps us make future videos. I'd also love to hear about your experiences with Solear or any of the other Barbadillo products. And also I'd like to hear about your suggestions for future episodes and subjects that we might cover. So I strongly recommend a visit to Sanlucar De Barrameda. The place just has a fantastic buzz about it. And whilst you're here, I also recommend a glass, well, in reality, half a bottle of Solear with some of the local specialities. Here, the langostinos de Sanlucar, very famous, and the pescado frito. But don't worry, I'm not going to eat all of this on my own. Guys, come on, let's eat. So with that, salud y nos vemos.